Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Air Sport. Every Champions Cup and now every Pro 14 game only on the Air Sport pack.
Welcome along. So we've got Matt Williams and Keith Wood with us. Keith, very excitingly for the viewers who are watching, I think we're going to see you suddenly. Are we? You're there?
It's a little bit frightening, I think, for everybody. It's a show. Just a little bit frightening. Hello, everybody. I have very large hands.
This is interesting. Do you wear a jacket and tie for every Wednesday Night Rugby? Is that just for us, yeah?
Always. Most days of the week there's a tie on. Actually, I rarely do. I'd say, depending on whatever type of business I'm doing at any given time, but about 2 days a week, shirt and tie. Bit disturbing, really.
Okay, no, listen, it's very, very smart. Well, actually, for the day that's in it then, if we go to the town of Rugby today, step forward World Hall of Fame inductee number 139, Ronan O'Gara, got his World Hall of Fame induction ceremony today. So, I mean, look, I suppose we have to acknowledge that we're in the presence of a Hall of Fame member here. Do you get to bring your sheep to graze on the town of Rugby, or what are the benefits here, Keith?
The benefits are you have a free pass for the Rugby Museum for life.
Okay.
Which is it's pretty cool, actually. The Hall of Fame Museum in Rugby is pretty cool. I went up there 2 years ago, and the town and the rugby club and the council all got together with World Rugby to try and pull this thing together. Do you know what? It's a great honour. It was funny. I was quite randomly earlier on today talking to Gareth Edwards, and we were having a conversation about the Hall of Fame years ago. And there was an amalgamation of two Halls of Fame. There used to be called the International Hall of Fame, and then World Rugby took them over as well. So I was inducted into the international one in 2005, and I got onto the bus, and all the greats from the 70s, all the Welsh team were sitting on it, and I turned to my wife. I said, I feel like a bloody schoolboy inside here. You know, have you ever felt totally out of place? And it's a bit chastening to and an unbelievable honour when you suddenly find yourself kind of put into the same group as them. And when you fast forward to today and see ROG, I didn't actually know that until half an hour ago that he was inducted in. And I'd been talking about him earlier on, and we were talking about some of his pure excellence that he had. He's a man who delivered on every stage, you know, and had an unbelievably long career, but a phenomenal winner, and absolutely deserving of his place in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I would think so. Matt, does he get the credit he deserves in the Southern Hemisphere? Sometimes, you know, from afar, it can be, the lads in green are Brian O'Driscoll and the rest.
I think the answer to that, Joe, is no, he doesn't. And I think you've mentioned the name there. If he wasn't in the same generation as Brian, Rog would be regarded as Ireland's greatest back since Jackie Kyle. He had a phenomenally successful career, the trophies he won, and so on. But I think he wasn't, or has never been given the credit outside of Ireland that he deserves. And I think the recognition that being placed in the Hall of Fame gives him on the world stage is a rich reward. Because although I never coached Rog, but I coached against him a lot, and he wasn't a good player; he was a fantastic player. His ability to turn you around and to pin you and put you under pressure was just simply extraordinary. And the other part with Ronan that used to annoy me a lot, especially when I stopped coaching and was just commentating, was people suggested he couldn't tackle. I sat next to Ronan in the commentary here back with you, Joe, in for the Six Nations, and he is not a big man. He's a slight man. I'm not a big person, and Ronan's smaller than me. And he was so brave in his defence. He never shirked a tackle. He got in the way of very, very big human beings, and he showed a lot of courage. But he was not a big man. He's not like Sexton and some of the more modern tens. He's a very slight guy. But I'm delighted for him personally, and I think it's an award that is richly, richly deserved.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll send him on our congratulations. I'm sure that we'll speak to him at some stage. I mean, if nothing else, Keith, he's powering on. The way he's building a coaching CV, I think everybody from afar is very impressed. He's going about it just the right way. Do you like the way he's going about it?
I love it, actually.
Yeah.
And, you know, for a guy who never played outside of Ireland, he had one club. He played for Munster for the whole time. You do need another perspective. You need... you need as many perspectives as you can get, and by going to France, by being a defensive coach, by being an attack coach, by then going down to New Zealand, which very, very, very few have. It's just not a place to play down there. They don't take many players. They don't want many players. They don't want many coaches down there. They're very happy for you to go down and see what they do for 2 or 3 months and then go home and kind of do it their way. They don't really kind of look to take somebody in from overseas to try and do it. I thought it was a ballsy move on his behalf because, as Matt said, he didn't get the credit in the Southern Hemisphere for the skills and capabilities that he had, and his winning capabilities, which are still rare in Ireland, you know. And he was a winning player, and he won in every club and in every team that he played for. So I think to have the attitude to go down there, to have the balls to kind of go down there and say, yeah, I'm going to put my head in the block in a place where they know their rugby backwards and put myself up for scrutiny, and then deliver in his first year, you know, as part of a winning management team is brilliant for him.
Yeah, it's very impressive. So the big talking point within Irish rugby all week has probably been Dominic Ryan's interview in the Irish Times with John O'Sullivan. Most people have probably read it by now or seen the bones of it. So Ryan's retired, 28 years of age. The real beginning of the end for him, about a year ago, this is just the short version, about a year ago he tackled George North at Franklin's Gardens, and he wasn't aware then he'd been knocked out. He thought he was winded, and so he continued on into the following weeks. He said of that particular tackle on North, I had my head on the wrong side in the tackle, but to me as a player, you're primitive, you're an animal. The sole focus is to take that person down. I didn't care how I was going to do it. But anyway, no HIA following that incident. Then I think 2 weeks later, he's at the stoop against the Harlequins, and he just got the most gentle clip on the head. I think a teammate was latching on. There was nothing in it, and he was carrying the ball, and next thing he knows, he's on top of the ball on his belly, and lads are saying, get up, what's wrong? So he took 12 weeks off at that stage. He came back in the new year, earlier this year, and they played Castres in the Heineken Cup, or the Champions Cup. He said, about 11 minutes into that game, I was involved in a big collision. I was tackled, hit the ground hard, my head bounced, I wasn't right, dizzy again. It happened 3 times in the first half. The dizziness lasted a couple of seconds before clearing. And at this stage, he's gone through 12 weeks of being off. He's worried about his career. He's had terrible symptoms, frankly. I mean, he's not able to go over speed bumps in cars. He's got sunglasses on, regardless of the weather, constant headaches, migraines. Anytime he exercises, he feels a pressure in his head. It's a very serious situation. And so this is his comeback from those 12 weeks out. And I suppose the line which maybe jumped out in some respects was in that Castres game. So he's had this first half on his return where he's had 3 bangs in the head. And he said at half-time, the forwards and the backs split up. I stared at the wall. I was thinking, how am I going to get through another 40 minutes? Because this, after all, was my 80-minute window to be employed for the next year. The forwards were talking about the line-out. I was staring at this white wall, trying to fight a rising sense of dread. And he talked about later in that match, he was told, you know, Joe Ford had the ball, said, you carry here. And he thought to himself on the field, I can't carry the ball because I felt I was now waiting to be knocked out. I grabbed the second row and threw him inside and said, you carry, I'll latch you through. Normally I'd be knocking lads out of the way. And very quickly he realises this is bad, this is very bad. So ultimately he's had to retire. Chilling on a number of levels. I mean, it's an emotional response we have to this, Keith, because this isn't new statistical evidence. We know everything, everything that's in this piece with John O'Sullivan in the Irish Times, we know is happening. But I suppose when a face is put to it and when a story is told as chillingly as that, it does have an impact. And it's had that impact in Irish rugby this week. Your thoughts on it?
I thought it was a harrowing article. I thought it was a refreshing level of honesty as well. It was actually interesting in that piece. They actually showed the tackle. His head is on the wrong side. We used to make a big thing of it in the BBC going back years. Kids, when you're watching it, don't do this, you know. And it's one of the elements, I I think of the gladiator sport, I think it's beginning to go, and maybe not going fast enough. The idea of stopping at any level, there has to be a level of safety that goes into it. But I love the honesty. I find it very upsetting. And look, I'm a father with 3 sons who play rugby, and of course I worry when I see all that sort of stuff. And I do think the game has to make changes all the time. And I don't think we're making the changes fast enough. But I think on a personal level, I think it's just incredible bravery from Dominic. And I also think that I'm happy he stopped. I'm happy he got out of it. I don't like the idea that it was 3 times where he's dizzy on his game back. And I remember having very similar feelings in a match that I was playing, but it was from a neck injury. And taking myself off a field, even though I was cleared fit to play. And I said, no, I'm not right. And I know I'm not right. And in fairness to the club at the time, to Harlequins, they said, okay, whatever you say. And it took another 2 months off before I came back. But that's something you can deal with. You can sense it. You can feel it. You're kind of in control of it. You're not really in control of concussions and elements of that. And, it to kind of understand the element of concussions. And I had a number in my career, not many, 3, I think, in total. Maybe some milder bangs, which of course aren't considered mild anymore, but they were mild in those days. But I never had a symptom after the fact. I may have had a symptom straight away and I was taken off the field. And at that stage, it was 3 weeks. It was mandatory. It was fine. But I remember seeing Will Greenwood on the lines. He got slammed into the ground. He hit the back of his head on the ground. He nearly died on the pitch in '97, and the lines, he swallowed his tongue. And but he had a dreadful, really bad concussion. And I remember seeing him the following day. And this just shows you maybe how things have changed over 21 years. He was groggy the following day, and I thought he was play acting. I thought he was saying, look, this is, it's really hard. And I'm saying, like, you're kind of, you're hamming this up a bit too much, only for the fact that I'd never had that sort of reaction to it. And I thought he was not play acting. I thought he was hamming it up and looking for sympathy. And it took me a long time to figure out that really isn't the case, that it's different for every person. It isn't one rule covers everybody. We have too much of it in our game. And I still feel we're not doing enough in it to try and eradicate it as much as we can.
Yeah. Eddie O'Sullivan was on Monday. Richie was on. I wasn't in myself, and Eddie was just making the point, Matt. Ultimately, look, the sad thing is this is a contact sport, and these are big men playing it at this level, and they're going to run into each other, and we're going to have this issue, but we just need to minimise it as much as possible, because quite clearly, and you see it with Dominic Ryan, who would have known about concussion. He's not from Keith's era in '97. He would have seen concussion and heard about concussion and seen what happened in the NFL, and still, that notion of sitting there at halftime, this is after his 12-week break, this is after all the symptoms, this is after everything, and he's sitting there at halftime and he says, how do I get through the next 40 minutes? This, after all, is my 80-minute window to be employed for the next year. So the notion, as aspirational and positive as it might be, that we can convince players to put their hand up and say, you know what, I'm not feeling right. They really can't be relied on to do it. They have to be protected from themselves. That was one of the overriding senses I got from this piece. Even the modern players, even with all the education, they have to be protected from themselves.
Oh, without doubt. There's a number of points in this, Joe. I think the first one is that they call it summit orientation. In other words, it's like from mountaineering. When you get close to the summit, you just put away all your fears, you drop reason, and you go for the summit. And a lot of people die on mountains because of it. Rugby players, it's a warrior sport. They're very, very competitive human beings. They don't, and look, they also don't want to admit weakness and failure. That's sort of frowned upon within themselves. And that's why you have doctors and our medical staff, which in Ireland have, the best I've ever seen are the Irish. And people are very aware, and they're not listening to, oh, no, I'm okay, they're doing that. But even so, some players still will resist it. And we all know that they'll do it. For a young boy in Australia last year, coached his dad, so I had an emotional tie into this young man, and he got a very bad concussion. It was exactly what Dominic had said. It was nothing. But what that young man gave, and I told him, I said, mate, time for you to stop playing. His dad said time to stop playing, and he stopped playing. And that was the right thing for him. He was only 18. Injury will stop us all. Can be shoulders, can be ankles. And a lot of guys are forced out of sport because of injury. Not all of us get to choose our time of departure. But a brain injury, this is so different and so unique. And I would say one last thing. It's what we said. We coach safety all the time. From the time you start playing the game, you are coached safety. It's not American football. American football is coached to put your head in the sternum of the attacker. So American football coach their players to put their head in harm's way. That's why they have so much problems with concussion and head injury. We don't. We coach to do the opposite. Are we doing enough? No, I agree with Keith. There's much, much more to be done. But what will be a problem for Dominic, and obviously is a problem, and you know, we never want to see that, but we will see it. But it won't be a problem for the next guy. He's the way he reacts to these things is different. You know, I coached Paddy Wallace and saw Paddy go through some really hard times with some very innocuous head knocks. And each player's resistance to it is different. And it is hugely complex. This is not I've spoken to neurologists about this, you know, and if you go to the hospitals, it's not full of rugby players. It's full of kids falling off bikes, car accidents and skateboards. That's where that serious head injury is. And as a neurologist said to me, heading a soccer ball jolts your brain. Landing, if you're a gymnast and you come off a pummel and do a somersault, land on the ground, it jolts your brain. Our brain gets jolted, he says, but it's the level that we can take and how that is done out and how we manage it. He as a neurosurgeon, was trying to explain to me, it's really complex.
Yeah, no doubt.
And what's happened to Dom is horrible, but I hope it's a lesson for other guys that you say, look, if I'm getting these symptoms, I do have to put my hand up. Yeah. But it's a never-ending education of our athletes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully, all his symptoms go away and he doesn't have any long-lasting ones. And if this is the right thing to do, that he absolutely stops now and he gets to live everything to be fine and full and perfect afterwards. That's the wish for everything. So that's why I was saying at the start, I'm glad he's retired.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be having these stories with bad things later on. So the right decision being made, and hopefully he can get on with the rest of his life.
No, here, yeah. This is Wednesday Night Rugby with thanks to Air Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. We have Keith Wood and Matt Williams here. A tangent on to the Dominic Ryan point, and we'll move off it now because there's one or two other things to get to. I think it's a really brilliant idea. It's a great initiative from the RFU, and they're linking up with UL. And so they have put together an injury database developed by sports scientists at UL and the RFU. And it's going to be a 6-year collaboration. And they've released their first annual findings today. So what they've done is they have tracked more than 600 players across the last season, 2017-18, from 19 AIL League clubs over 418 matches. So it's very much rooted in where the amateur game is. And they're going to add in schools and underage clubs next year. And so I mean, I guess kind of worrying, you know, the most common injury is concussion, is what they found. So 12% of all injuries in amateur rugby over the last season were concussion, followed closely by ankle ligament strains at 11%. And players generally were out of the game for 30 days with those concussions. The RFU medical director, Dr. Rod McLaughlin, calling for immediate consideration of the amateur sports tackle area. And so that is a whole other side of things, away from professionalism and away from Dominic Ryan sitting in a dressing room worrying about his future. This is just the amateur situation. So they're going to keep this going for the next 6 years. And look, you got to acknowledge the problem, you got to get information on it, and they're doing that. And I think it's fantastic that they're taking a lead in this, because not every country is keeping track of things. Do either of you favour, sorry to throw a question out to two, so jump in. Do either of you favour changing the tackle area, contact area at amateur level initially to get things moving quicker?
I 100% do.
Okay.
Not only do I think we should change some of the other rules within rugby. I'm not entirely sure there should be lifting in the line-out in amateur rugby, and I'm not entirely sure you should be lifting at kickoffs in amateur rugby or professional rugby, I have to say. I'm not a fan. I just think we need to de-risk certain elements. I'm also a fan if at some stage we are losing a huge number of players from rugby, because it's very tough and it's very competitive very early on, very honours driven from the school level, which is brilliant, fantastic. No criticism on that for the ones that are elite and get up to that level. But for those who want to play, who want to be part of the camaraderie of the game, to have the joy of being in a team room, a lot of those guys are stopping at 20 and 21. And I think it can get to the point of where we may have some of the change in the laws so that you can actually go and play the game and it isn't as aggressive as it is in the professional game. The game has changed just hugely since the game has gone professional.
Okay. I know you're going to have to run very shortly, Keith, so quick word on the Pro 14. So we saw at the weekend Glasgow beating Munster. It was a strong Glasgow side and a fairly inexperienced Munster side. We talked about Joey Carberry last week. He's going to come back in and he's going to start this weekend at home to Ospreys, so that should be a good game. Leinster have the Dragons. I mean, Leinster were obviously away to Scarlets. There's a real rivalry bubbling away with the Scarlets and Leinster. There was a scrum on about the hour mark on Saturday. I don't know if you saw it, and the Scarlets players celebrated winning the scrum so much that even Liam Toland in commentary said about the Scarlets lads, here, calm down a little bit, you know. And then the celebrations at full time were kind of similar. They absolutely loved beating Leinster. It's actually the best rivalry now in the Pro 14, I think, if that's maybe sacrilege to say it, but it really is.
Well, it's a cracking rivalry from two teams that know how to win, and also for the fact to see the Scarlets beating the European champions and the Pro 14 champions. They're going to be absolutely delighted with it. Leinster made a couple of mistakes at the end of the game. I'm not going to say they didn't need to lose the game, but they could have won that game and didn't. It's a cracking rivalry. Two teams that are out to play a fairly expansive style of rugby is pretty cool. From Munster's perspective, I thought Glasgow were on fire, and I didn't think Munster got to the pace of the game. I mean, that first half from Glasgow was astounding from them and pretty poor from Munster. And that's a shell shock to have so many callow-faced players trying to face a team that were on fire. They had set their stall out that this was going to be a really, really big performance with a big team. I was very disappointed to see Neil Cronin getting injured. I just, do you know what? He looked, for me, he looks like the second in line to Conor Murray in Munster very, very quickly. He has a level of assuredness to his game that I don't know that we see in the other nines. I feel as if they're under pressure to perform all the time. Maybe it's because he's a little bit older coming into it, that this is a second bite at the cherry. He just seems not to be as rushed or as anxious. He just seems to be very calm into it. And for him to get injured in a kind of a collision, being nice to that comment, was sad. So that was disappointing. I think Munster's performance, they didn't get to the level they should have. But I was disappointed because of the injuries. Okay, we'll let you go. You have to go. Thanks a million for joining us. Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks very much. Bye. Matt, you don't go anywhere for the time being. I do want to ask you about Rassie Erasmus in a second, Matt, who's under a bit of pressure and worth keeping an eye on. Anything from the Pro 14 catch your eye?
Comments, even though it's very early in the season.
Sorry, Matt, we didn't have your fader up just there at the moment. Give us that again.
I think just following on Keith's comments and putting the waiver out there that it's very, very early in the season. Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on Munster this year. I think it's a very pivotal season for them. There were a lot of alarm bells going off for me in some of their performances at the end of last season, especially the semi-final against Racing there in the Champions Cup, and one or two of their other games late in the year. And I think it's going to be a year where Munster will be sorely tested. I think it could be a year that's not great for them, or they'll grow up and move forward. So I think the next few weeks are really pivotal for them, especially when you do compare that Connacht who are on paper significantly behind Munster, did play pretty well against the same opponents. Only, I think it was a week before, 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very, very interesting time and for that Munster team and their coach.
And what's prompting the alarm bells, given there was a sense that, well, Van Graan really will get his feet under the table over the summer, Joey Carberry is really going to add something, there was a sense they were moving in the right direction. Any specifics or things that you're not liking the look of?
Yeah, I just think when the opposition are down in Limerick and they bring a weakened side like a lot of teams do, they're fine. But when they have to get down in the gutter, which is what Munster teams have been renowned for, all the Munster teams I coached against, when you had to get down in the gutter with them if you weren't prepared to slug it out. That's where we used to have that saying at Leinster, don't take a knife to a gunfight. And every time you play Munster, it's going to be a gunfight, so get ready for it. But I think that they're living in the past on some of the past glories, this current team. And I want to see them get down in the gutter and get tough on some of these games. And I think it was the performance last week was exactly that. And Keith said it. They never got to the pace of the game. Give Glasgow a lot of credit, and I think they're playing particularly well at the beginning of the season. But it is very early. And I'm not writing Munster off. I'm just saying it is going to be interesting to watch. Are they mentally strong enough to get down tough and hard where you've got to get to if you're going to A, make a playoff, and B, win it? And that's where we want to see this, whether this Munster team can grow into it. Okay.
Meanwhile, the Rugby Championship continues. New Zealand beat Argentina. It was 46-24 in the end, and then a fairly dramatic finish to Australia. South Africa 23-18 in the end. South Africa spent a good last 5, 6, 7 minutes camped inside the Australian 22 and didn't manage to get over the line. So Rassie Erasmus isn't there a long time. 1 win from 3 in the Rugby Championship, 3 wins in 7 under Rassie. I can't say I've seen every minute of those 7 games, but he's been asked, is he going to be under pressure for his job if they suffer another humiliation at the hands of New Zealand? They were beaten 57-0 last time they played, but are you under pressure for your job here? He said, yes, I do think so, he said. I'd be shocked, really, because he's just in the door. Everyone I've spoken to in rugby were saying that Erasmus is going to have South Africa turn up at next year's World Cup in very, very good shape. So you might give us your thoughts on what you're seeing at the moment.
Well, I think, first of all, South Africa might be ranked, I think they're ranked 7 in the world at the moment.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
But in the mind of the South Africans, the South Africa and New Zealand were on par. They were the great powers of world rugby for the best part of 120 years. And for them to be where they are is very, very difficult for the people in South Africa to cope with. And they do expect you to win. Almost a very similar mentality in New Zealand. They expect to win games. Now, those days are gone. But their mental approach to it hasn't changed. So the coach, they change coaches on performance a lot faster than almost any other country. And if you look at the number of coaches over the last few years, and you'd have to also say in the past there has been some political elements to those appointments.
Yeah.
There is pressure because there is that political element out there. I think Rassie is an excellent coach. I think he is. I've known him as a young man. I coached against him, and unfortunately he broke his jaw in Sydney against us, so we used to visit him in hospital and looked after him because he couldn't fly. I got to know him, and he's a gentleman, an absolute gentleman. But they will lose to New Zealand, and they'll lose badly, because everyone does. Argentina played their absolute hearts out, and it was a cracking game. And you watch that game, and then you looked at the end of the scoreboard and said, New Zealand really scored 40 points. That's what they'll do to you, even when you play really, really well. I thought the Australians, to give Australia a little bit of credit, they defended very, very well in that last 10-minute period. But the South Africans asked very little questions. They're just coming off 9. Now, they're huge big men coming around the corner, but and that usually does beat Australia, but they didn't. They stood up. It's like they didn't have a plan B in attack. And their handling was very, very poor. Australia have lost the penalty count. I think it's the last 9 games they've lost the penalty count. Against Ireland, they were so ill-disciplined. And against New Zealand and last week, terrible penalties they were giving away. South Africa could have and should have. But I think it was on both parts. Michael Checker was really under the pump. But the history of those two teams, I think the last two games they were draws, and then that game should have been a draw, could have been. It was millimetres in it. But Rassie will come out of New Zealand with his tail well between his legs, unfortunately. Not because of anything he does wrong. New Zealand are just a great side, just a fabulous team.
Okay, well,
and they'll beat everyone in the world. Yeah,
for sure. I don't. It seems, based on reading the media there, he's going to feel the heat for it. Maybe if that's unfair or not, I don't know. But we'll see how he turns it around. Matt, super stuff as always. Thanks so much.
Pleasure, Joe.
Cheers, take care. Matt Williams there, and plenty of comments coming in from Matt and Keith. I'll get to them on the far side of the break, and if you have sent in a text or a tweet, then you're in with a chance to win our Heineken Comment of the Week. Across the season, the winners, we announce them every Friday for any of the rugby chats we have. The winners can win matchday tickets and some OTB goodies as well. So I'll read out some of the texts in just a moment. Matt Williams and Keith Wood there.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Air Sport. Both Munster v Leinster derbies exclusively live on Air Sport.